partner states to be able, so that the hospitality industry, most importantly, can recover. To be able, and also we have seen banks announcing some liquidity and relief funds to assist SMEs in the tourism and hospitality sector that have been suffering. And therefore, the EAC thinks and took it upon ourselves to call upon the regional ministers in charge of the tourism sector, people that are in charge of the tourism boards, as well as the private sector, so that we can sit and discuss and chart out ways on how we can recover slowly. So in that, without taking further ado, let me go straight to the questions, but I will want to, before I take the questions, announce the ground rules. We kindly request that you mute your microphone when we are not speaking, and we request that you respect the panelists' views, because it is their views. And also we request that it becomes an interactive meeting where you can contribute so that we can reach our objectives. We request that you stay on point and on time so that we will have the maximum of two hours. Let's remain focused on the topic. Let's not deviate away from the topic. Then we shall have questions to be sent to the chat room kindly to be able to save time. Send your questions to the chat room and we shall be able to address the questions. Also, the meeting will be recorded, just to tell you that the meeting will be recorded for the purpose of having the meeting on record, and it's for nothing else but for our recording purposes. So we request that you know that it is going to be recorded. Our panelists today, we have Honorable Dr. Hamis Kigwangalla, who is the Honorable Minister, Natural Resources and Tourism, United Republic of Tanzania. You're welcome, sir. If you already arrived, could you probably let us know, Honorable, if you're around? Honorable Dr. Hamisi, you're around? You could just mute your mic, then just say hello to us. All right, probably Honorable will join in a bit. Honorable, you're around?
I saw him online. We need to check.
Probably the EABC team could kindly unmute his microphone so that we can be able to hear him. But we also have Honorable Christophe Bazivamo, who is the Deputy Secretary General at the EAC Secretariat, in charge of productive and social sectors. You're welcome, Honorable Christophe. Kindly say hello to us if you're around so that we can recognize your presence, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Honorable.
Yeah, we are together.
Oh, thank you. So we have also Ms. Belize Kariza, the Chief Tourism Officer, Rwanda Development Board. Ms. Belize, if you're around, kindly just wave to us and we recognize your presence. I'll probably she'll join later. She'll say hello to us later. Can we also have? We also have Honorable Amisi. Are you around? Are you around so that you wave to us? Honorable Amisi, have you arrived?
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, Honorable Minister. Thanks for having us, and we're honored to have you around, sir. And we have Mr. Mohamed Hersi. I hope I pronounced the name very well, and apologies if I have not. If you, Mr. Mohamed, the Chairman of Kenya Tourism Federation, kindly wave to us if you are around, sir.
Thank you, Geoffrey. Good to be here, and looking forward to a good interactive session. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome, Mr. Mohamed Hersi. Then we have Mr. Richard Kawesi. Mr. Richard Kawesi, the CEO of Uganda Tourism Association. Are you available, sir? Are you around, sir, so that we wave to us and recognize your presence? Mr. Richard? All right. Mr. Richard Kawere, my apologies. Are you around, sir? The CEO of Uganda Tourism Association.
Yes, I am available, and thank you for hosting us.
Karibu sana, thank you so much. So my name is Geoffrey Kamanzi. I work for the East African Business Council in the Department of Policy, and specifically I'm in charge of trade and services, and the tourism falls within that particular docket. So ladies and gentlemen, let's go straight to the questions, to our discussion. And my first question will go to Ms. Belize Kaliza, if she's around, because I understand that actually you told me, I was informed by your office that you have limited time, and I would feel that we'll begin with you. If you're around, Ms. Belize. Ms. Belize is around. All right, if Ms. Belize is not around, then we'll begin with Mr. Muhammad here. See, let's start with you, the chairman, Tourism Federations of Kenya.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh yeah, we can hear you. Are you around?
I'm
Belize?
here.
Oh, thank you. If we request that you could open your video, please, we could look at you so that we can talk to you face to face. Other panelists will definitely remain their videos on.
Unfortunately, when I try to put my video on, I get an issue with my connection.
Okay, not a problem at all. CTO. We will go direct, and thanks for honoring our invitation. Good to have you around. And maybe Rwanda has championed the nature tourism and MICE industry as a subsector flagship of the economy. Given the adverse effect on COVID-19, in your opinion, what would be the resilience plan in ensuring that such initiatives remain sustainable amidst this pandemic? Madam Belize. All
right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. It's such an honor to actually have a specifically EAC area. And indeed, I think we all are aware that tourism is a strategic sector for Rwanda in particular. And in 2019, we recorded the total tourism contribution to the GDP of 10%, and 8% of Rwanda's off-farm employment. We also have tourism revenues and volume that had been like the rest of the world. Rwanda was hit pretty badly when it came to this pandemic. And however, when we're following the UNWTO call for action to mitigate the socioeconomic impact of COVID-19 and accelerate recovery, they have put forward three main pillars that tourism should focus on, or destination government should focus on. And the first one is, of course, the management of this crisis and mitigation of the impact, as well as providing stimulus and accelerating the recovery, and finally preparing for tomorrow. So in that line, there are a couple of things that we've done as a tourism board, and of course as a government, as an entity. The first thing is that we're focused on employee training. So we're currently working with different partners to make sure that this industry is well trained, and the focus, of course, is on digital skills to prepare them to the new normal, which is most likely going to be a digital transformation on how we function as an industry. And of course, to ensure that they are able to leverage on this on this as well when travel resumes. The second thing is we're working on is investment in a digital marketing. Like you've seen, and of course it makes sense because people don't travel anymore. Most of people are glued on their phones or on the computer, and we're taking that as a way to invest and as a push to invest in digital marketing. So we're using different modern technology tools to advance our marketing by creating different online resources that we can share with partners. For example, we've been conducting a lot of webinars with the different travel agents to keep Rwanda top of mind, so that when travel resumes, we score as much as possible. We also continue, of course, to work with the private sector here in Rwanda, both in the tourism industry, but most importantly with the ICT industry, because like we all understand, technology has become the new way of working, the new way of communicating. So we're engaging daily with them to have input on this angle. In fact, later on this afternoon, I am going to be exposed to a different concept, different ideas from our young entrepreneurs in the ICT sector, and the idea is to listen to them and see if they can in this industry. The third point, of course, is like most of the countries are doing, is to focus on domestic tourism. So we've invested in a domestic tourism strategy, and the purpose is to allow the industry to slowly recover. And we expect people to only be able to travel within their countries. And as we also build confidence to travel to long haul destination, and in this case, for example, if you talk about EAC destinations, but until then, the focus is going to be solely on domestic tourism. The other important factor in traveling is transportation, and we're also working with the aviation authority as well as our national carrier. Put up a mitigation strategy and actually even being ready to welcome international tourists. And in fact, like you've seen, some airlines are already starting announcing the operation in the different part of Africa, of this region. The other point, of course, is that we had to think and really be creative in diversification of our product, our services, our markets. And now we are currently working on diversifying or developing new and niche product, especially with a strong focus on local communities and conservation areas. Last but not least, we are in strong collaboration and consultation with the Ministry of Health, and as well as consultation with partners in conservation, where we've actually put up guidelines for the tourism and hospitality industry in order to ensure readiness of the sector for when tourism activities. Talking about guidelines for the hospitality industry, restaurants, hotels, which in fact have started gradually opening. We also have worked on guidelines to reopen our national parks, and we're currently working on guidelines to reopen all other entertainment activities. So we're doing a lot, and as you can see, we're borrowing from UNWTO, we're borrowing from WTTC, and of course from the different destinations that we partner with. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Belize. We're happy to hear that you're actually planning the reopening strategy on entertainment and also but benchmarking on what is happening elsewhere. We look forward to this opening and the rest of the community opens. I'll get back to you on more in terms of nature tourism, but let me welcome Honorable Minister Hamis Kigwangala, sir. The private sector in the EAC has been affected in the short, medium, and long term. What could be the resumption strategy for them, in your opinion, Honorable Minister?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear, Honorable Minister.
In the first place, I would like to thank you for inviting us to participate in this important webinar in our region. And as everybody might have noted, the world is passing through unprecedented times following the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic that has taken toll on the tourism sector. Perhaps after the health sector, then comes next to be hit as an economic sector would be the tourism sector. So Tanzania is not isolated. It is equally impacted by various measures that have been taken by most of the source countries, measures that include the closing of borders, undergoing the various lockdown measures, restrictions, and things of the sort. But as well, some airlines also stopped their flights because they couldn't organize their trips to various destinations because of border closures. So that being the case, we started experiencing the decrease in numbers of tourists coming to Tanzania from mid of March. And most of you might have known the tourism sector is actually one of the most strategic sectors of our economy, as it contributes more than 25% of the foreign exchange earnings. And it also, apart from the agri sectors, it is the major contributor of employment opportunities to our people. But as well, the tourism sector contributes a little bit more than 17.6% of the GDP. So the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic would have caused so much distress to our economy as it is expected. But we took measures first to address the pandemic, trying to fight spread, but secondly, trying to save the economy itself that actually is contributed by the tourism sector. And now the private sector, how it's been hit because they couldn't receive numbers of tourists as it was expected. We ended up expecting most of the private sectors, most of the private sector companies laying off workers. But the government decided to undertake measures to curb this from happening, because we knew that during all this is finished, there will be a need for the private sector to be healthy so that it can be ready to receive tourists again. So before we could witness the private sector dying, collapsing, we decided to find means to serve it. One of the measures that we put in place was to pronounce 7 measures under the Central Bank of Tanzania that would at least save the private sector. That's one of the major things that the government undertook. Issues like restructuring of loans, reduction of interest for the private sector, as well as issues of freezing the statutory government payments, and as well being a mediator between the employers and the employees with regards to their employment positions within these companies. Helped so many companies from running bankruptcy, because if they had run bankrupt, it would have been very difficult for us to resume tourism activities, because they'd be confident in sending their money and booking their safaris to Tanzania, because they would be worried that they wouldn't receive the services as they had booked for, because the companies would declare bankrupt. So we saved the private sector by a number of measures, including the few that I've mentioned. Hello?
Yes, I hear you, Honorable Minister. I hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, but we've been working also very closely with the private sector, trying to set guidelines as we are reopening up. So we have a guideline for all the services within the tourism value chain. We have protocols for restaurants and eateries. We have also put in place guidelines for sports and entertainment activities, guidelines for hotels and other accommodation facilities, lodges, campsites, and everything, and also guidelines for transportation vessels, including water vessels, how to provide services in all these facilities. But as well, we also are working very closely with the private sector, trying to push the message that Tanzania is ready to receive tourists, and we are seeing now a number of airlines are starting coming to Tanzania, and some are scheduling their flights to Tanzania from early June this month until perhaps at the end of June. We might be having more than 5 or 6 international flights coming to Tanzania. And we are also receiving tour operators that are coming to sort of wreck their pathway and see how prepared we are. Because within the guideline, we've put a number of measures that would ensure safety of the tourists, and as well safety of the service providers in the tourism value chain, all the way from the flight at the airport, tourism, passenger vehicles, as well as the accommodation facilities within the cities or within the parks. So we've been working very closely, for sure, with the private sector, trying to push this message. And Tanzania has dedicated itself in using the digital platforms, trying to push the message out there, but as well linking up with the vast network of tour operators, travel agents, and accommodation facility operators world over. So our message is very clear. Our strategy is very clear. It's known to the market, and we are hoping that in the first week, tourism will start revamping itself slowly. And perhaps it might pick up sometimes in mid-July all the way to August and beyond. Maybe this serves for the opening remarks that I would like to provide. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Indeed, Tanzania has put a lot of guidelines to ensure that the sector is opening slowly. And actually, I think some partner states or practitioners should pick a leaf for what your ministry is doing. So we'll get back to you, Honorable, for more insights. Let's go to Mr. Mohamed Hersi, the chairman of Kenya Tourism Federation. So the tourism sector has been hit hard across the partner states, and Kenya has not been left out. What is the actual picture of the effect in Kenya, sir? And how has the sector been coping so far? And what is the future of the new normal, the situation in Kenya, sir? We'll borrow from your insights. Mr. Mohamed.
Thank you, Geoffrey. Good afternoon to fellow panelists, and good afternoon to all the attendees. Thank you for inviting me and inviting Kenya to this forum. I'm a strong believer in the spirit of Africa, and it begins with our region, and I'm glad that I'm here. Now, when it comes to tourism, Kenya definitely, tourism contributes close to 12.5% of the GDP. And Kenya's tourism is a big player when it comes to our economy. Firstly, let me talk quickly about Kenya Tourism Federation, which is a private sector. And this is the umbrella body that brings all the the organizations, or rather the tourism associations, under one umbrella. And we engage our government, because our government has been very responsive over all the past years. And they want to deal with one body, and that's the Kenya Tourism Federation. Kenya Tourism Federation brings together the Kenya Association of Hotel Keepers that takes care of all the hotels in the country. Then we have the Kenya Association of Tour Operators. Then we have the travel agents. But then we have the air operators. Then we have a new player, the pubs and restaurants, which basically take care of entertainment in this country. And then we have ecotourism, because sustainability is key in tourism and in any business that you do. So when COVID came calling, because we were looking to a great 2020, so like any other country around the region and globally, 2019 was quite a very good year, and we were looking forward to building on the blocks that we built in 2018 and 2019. So everybody had a beautiful focus for 2020, and suddenly COVID happened. The rest, as they say, is history. Now, most important is it's not what has happened to you that really matters or what hurts you. It's how you deal with it. Now, if you decide not to deal with it in the right way, then you get hurt. But I'm happy that you brought us together in this forum today for us to compare notes. And personally, I'm a strong believer that we must all do well for the region to do well. And we must all move together so that we can go far. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to walk fast, then go alone. But if you want to reach far, walk together. And the fact that we are here together under the East African Business Council means a lot to us. Now, when it comes to COVID, and how did it affect us? Obviously, this is a health challenge. In the past, we've had security challenges in this country, and we've dealt with it in our own way and managed to overcome it. But this time around, it's a global thing. And when you look at health issue, this now goes to the safety and the well-being of that traveler. And when that happens, the first thing is that everybody feels safe to go back home. And that's exactly what happened. So today, all the airspace everywhere globally is closed, apart from very few places. But as how His Excellency the President, Uhuru Kenyatta, said the other day, he said, we cannot close ourselves forever. And WHO guidelines, WHO have also announced that this virus will be with us for a long time. So we might as well get used to it. But most importantly is that we need to start living with it to make sure that we put protocols and guidelines in place to protect ourselves and to protect the businesses that we run, and also to protect all the visitors who come to our country. So how did it affect us? Obviously, all the hotels became empty. And as we speak right now, over 95% of the hotels are all closed, simply because there's no airline coming into the country. And that's one of the first few steps that was taken by the government. And likewise, even in the region, and everybody else did that, because we did not understand the virus. And when you don't understand something, you start from the extreme and you start coming back slowly to reopen when you understand it, and you put protocols in place. Now, having said that, our government was very responsive when we met them. Hardly 10 days after the COVID came home, and we were given straight away, I recall, $5 million to get us going, specifically when it comes to soft marketing, and then another $2 million to drive the issue of communication, still on the Kenya Tourism Board. But recently, that was last week, a more heavier approach was made, a more stronger approach was made by the government, apart from reducing VAT from 16 to 14%, and many other measures, including banks to restructure the loans that are owed by the tourism players, because that's very important, because businesses are undergoing a lot of distress. But the key element that was made by our government was $56 million that's going to help us, specifically to hotels, $2 billion, $20 million. And then there was another $20 million. And this is very unique. And I hope the region also copies from that because of conservation, because our tourism is mainly based on wildlife. And we've realized that wildlife is exposed, conservation is coming under a lot of distress because people who are working, taking care of these animals are no longer employed. So what happens is that you start getting bushmeat trade coming in, then eventually they graduate into poaching, which is ivory, both elephants and rhinos. So for us to avoid that, we've allocated $20 million to take care of all the rangers for the next 1 year so that our animals and wildlife can remain safe. We don't want a scenario when you reopen, you find that you actually have nothing left of your fauna and flora. Then we now started putting our minds into reopening. And one of the things that we've done is to start coming up with protocols, which is actually done right from the airlines, the airports, the hotels, the pubs and restaurants, so that we are ready when the world is also ready. We cannot wait until we are told, hey, the world will like come to you, is when you're trying to put your ducks in a row. It doesn't work like that. So, and I'm happy also to see Tanzania, our neighbors, we work together very closely, that they are also putting a lot of measures in place, and we are able to attract people to this region. So moving forward, I think I'd like to say those few words as an introduction. So I just want to tell you, Geoffrey, and everybody, that Kenya is getting ready, and a lot of airlines also. In fact, we are the ones holding them, especially the Middle Eastern carriers who want to come back, and our own national carrier is also ready. All the measures are in place, and if we start reopening, the first one, of course, Geoffrey, is the domestic tourism, and then we'll start slowly opening into the region that is our neighbors. Because when you look also in Europe, they're also very careful. They're not opening their doors wide open for everybody at the same time. The last thing we want is an upsurge of this virus. Thank you very much, Geoffrey.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mohammed. Indeed, the beauty about the priorities is that you're also looking at the communities, the rangers, the $20 million that take care of them. I think to me that is very important. And I think maybe we could. And the domestic tourism being key at the forefront. Honestly, charity begins at home, and we need to diversify our markets in terms of our consumers of our service. Let's go direct to, thank you so much, Mohammed. I'll definitely get back to you as well. Let's get to Honorable Christophe Bazivamo, the Deputy Secretary General, Productive and Social Service, East African Community. Honorable, due to flight bans as well as international and regional travel restrictions, airlines revenues have drastically been affected and temporarily stopped operations. What is the EAC doing to ensure that the region will remain an attractive tourism destination post-COVID-19 pandemic? Honorable Christophe Bazivamo.
Thank you, Geoffrey. Let me begin by, first of all, greeting Honorable Minister Kigwangala from Tanzania, Miss Belize from Rwanda, and Mr. Hersi Mohammed from Kenya. And good afternoon, all of our participants. I wish to say and concur with my predecessor that tourism is one of the most significant sector in all our East African community economies. As it has rightly said, actually on average, we see contribution.
Honorable Bazivamo, we seem to be losing you. Okay.
And we see also it for almost 20% of our. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but it's cutting a bit. There's a lot of cuts in the network. Probably, let's see if you can stabilize, get a stable network.
Oh, let me say.
But we cannot hear you now.
used to about 20% export yearly, and of our national GDPs, and also at around 9% when it comes to jobs creation. And we wish also to highlight the fact that tourism has been affected among other sectors in the region, and as you have quoted, due to many measures taken in partner states, especially when it comes to transport, we can say that it has dropped actually between 40% and 60%, and this we witness it in the region. And it was important to take measures of, let's say that there are global measures which have been, and which also impact on the tourism, including having at West African community level regional coordination committee on COVID, which has developed a regional response plan to help mobilization of funds in addressing the pandemic impact. And through this regional committee, we have been able to together
Honorable Bazivamo, we seem to be losing you again on your network. We seem to be losing you again, sir.
So,
we can hear you, and I request someone that has opened the mic, please kindly mute if you're not contributing, so that you can listen to Honorable Bazivamo make his submissions. Kindly mute. I request the EABC team to mute people's microphone unless someone is talking. Thank you so much. Honorable Bazivamo, please go ahead.
Let me speak very quickly. Let me speak very quickly by saying that there are measures which are taken at regional, including having our ministers in charge of ministers in charge of transport and trade together to find actually which kind of regional decisions, regional commitment and engagement which can, first of all, to address the pandemic sector, but also to facilitate trade in the region. This has been put in place. And you have also got an opportunity to have to give us some heads of state in a consultative meeting to come up with some proposals and directives on how to move forward in addressing this pandemic at a regional level. We understand there are national measures which have been taken, but they have to be completed by regional measures. If measures to stop the pandemic or to mitigate the pandemic are not effective, then the tourism sector will not move forward. And it is the reason why actually one of very, very important requests or partner states at national level or agreed upon directives which have been taken to mitigate the pandemic, including these meetings which are to be face-to-face, stop of traveling. But after these measures, we think about what is coming after the pandemic, post-COVID. We, of course, understand that it will take long, but we say it is always important as the first measures to ensure enforcement of mitigating measures to stop the pandemic. And here we appreciate and see that some in partner state, measures like developing and implementing safety measures and guidelines in hotels, in restaurants, to ensure hygiene standards are respected in all tourism facilities. We insist also on the fact that at the airport, and we have mobilized funds for that, to train airport staff. This is ongoing, and we request, of course, partner states to ensure these trainings are well concluded. We have got money from Germany, which we have actually used in collaboration with CASOA and AMREF to ensure in all the 8 airports in the region, training of staff are done to prepare for the opening of airports. And this is an important contribution when we think about tourism in the days to come. We have also mobilized our funds, especially when it comes to awareness creation and sensitization through Red Cross at national level, coordinated by the International Red Cross, to ensure with ministers of health, measures are taken and respected and implemented by citizens, East African citizens, so that we can avoid the spread of this pandemic. So to say, Geoffrey and dear participants, at the East African community level, we have thought that coordinating what is being done at national level comes as a value addition of what is being done at national level. So these trainings are important. Measures to prevent the spread of the pandemic are important. The East African community COVID-19 response plan, if well implemented, is also an asset when it comes to prepare for what will come tomorrow. And I wish to inform also that we have developed a regional COVID-19 economic recovery plan covering all key.
Hello? Hello?
May I request that you kindly mute your microphone if you're not submitting in the middle of someone's submission? Please kindly request you to mute your microphone so that we give time for Honorable Christopher Zivama to complete his submission. Thank you so much.
Yes, I was also like concluding on this question by saying that we are planning on the 16th of June this month to have a meeting of ministers in charge of tourism or sectoral council on tourism to analyze what is happening in partner state and to come up together with a regional orientation on how to move forward together in this sector. And I take this opportunity to actually request the minister from Tanzania and other ministers who are there, including Ms. Bellis and the people in charge of tourism in Kenya, to ensure that this meeting of ministers, which is planned on 16th, have good attendance, so that measures which are taken can actually give a regional response on how to move forward, especially in this recovery program. And this is planned in our East African Community COVID-19 Economic Recovery Plan, which covers also tourism. Globally, what I wanted to say is that the tourism sector is a key sector, one of the most important sectors in East Africa, where we focus and we really think about it in the recovery plan. We have thought about it in the response plan at the East African Community level, and you appreciate and thank ministers of East African Community Affairs, ministers of health, transport, trade, who have met in March, in April, and recently in May, to come up with some guidance at regional level to ensure we are moving together in this fight against COVID-19. but also to plan together for post-pandemic, which we know will last long. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Bazivamo. Indeed, the regional response plan, we look forward to it, and the coordinated mobilization of resources to ensure that COVID is fought at a regional level, is commendable, and we thank you for the fact that you're training airport staff. This is quite a remarkable contribution to fighting this pandemic as to trying to recover. Maybe as we still together, are we looking at, do you think the open skies, these open skies could be a possible solution, one of the possible solutions as one of the ways we can try to recover and also promote domestic, if I say domestic, I mean regional EAC tourism. What's your take, Honorable Bazivamo, on the EAC opening the skies to facilitate tourism flow? Honorable, we don't seem to hear you.
There are people who are interfering, I think. What I was saying is, actually, open sky is one of the solutions. We have been discussing this matter even before the pandemic. And in this period, we have also been discussing this matter. And we think maybe this COVID-19 could have been an opportunity of bringing partner states actually to agree on moving very quickly forward. The trend seems to be positive. You know, normally they have agreed on many areas when it comes to having a common air space. And what was remaining actually was about considering which are the shares when it comes to calling or an airline on East African one. So the trend is positive. We expect it will be coming on board. We have recently organized also a meeting of ministers, ministers in charge of finance, investments, trade, what we call the STIFI regional sectoral council of ministers in charge of trade, industry, finance. And the trend also is to see which kind of stimulus package to be given to support the tourism sector and to help investment in that sector and to support tourism jobs. When you have these ministers agreeing, which is positive, it helps also to push ministers in charge of transport to finally agree on this open sky. And we expect it will be done. And we think it will be one of the contribution actually to help this sector to move forward better. When we speak about the East African community to be seen as a single tourism destination, it is important to understand that one airspace, when we have an open sky, this will be also helping implementation of this East African community to be seen as a single tourism destination. And the ministers have been discussing actually a protocol on tourism, which include this element. We have been discussing East African community marketing strategy, which also includes this having one partner state. This has been agreed upon, and will come actually a solution. To conclude, I wish the issue of developing skills and outreach programs for medium and small enterprises has also been in for eye of discussions of ministers in charge of finance, and this also will be complementing actually this kind of thinking. So to say, the answer is yes, and then to complete by saying that the East African community is pushing this to happen, and we see a kind of light that it will be possible. Once it is implemented, it will be very helpful for the sector actually to develop better than it has been ever before. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Christophe Bazivamo, and that is very good information to us that at least our discussions are at a very good level to ensure that, because to ensure that the skies are open at the EAC level, and that is one of our priorities at the EABC, to ensure that our members can fly and move within the community at a very limited cost. Let's talk to Mr. Richard Kaweri, the CEO of Uganda Tourism Operators Association. Mr. Richard, the travel sector has been huge. There has been the travel sector has seen huge cancellations and rescheduling of tourists incoming with travel cancellations have with their own challenges. These cancellations have really come with their own challenges. How are the tour operators positioning themselves to mitigate this and many other challenges presented by COVID-19 in the travel industry?
Thank you, Godfrey. Just allow me, I would want to structure out this presentation in about 3 areas. One, I would want the listeners to understand what Uganda Tourism Association is, and I would want to say this is a body, an apex body that represents all tourism operators in Uganda. We have 8 associations in number. We have the Association of the Uganda Tour Operators. We have the Uganda Hotel Owners. We have the Hotel General Managers Association. We have a Crafts Association. We have the Travel Agents Association, the Safari Guides Association. So basically, we are 8 number. The women in trade, in tourism trade. We have a total of 8 associations that we represent at that level. Coming to COVID, well, we all know that there was no country that was expecting such a situation. We came off the 2018-2019, which was a very good year in terms of tourism receipts, arrivals. In that year, our country was able to realize about 1.6 billion in terms of revenue, foreign exchange. Our contribution to the national GDP was about 7.7%. Our contribution as a sector to employment was about 6.3%. But all this under COVID collapsed. All of you know that this is a period when we have a peak season in the region where we expect more arrivals. At the moment, we expect 0 arrivals, meaning that revenues are at a standstill. What does this mean to the sector? The sector was heavily hit with cancellations that were supposed to be achieved this year. But one of the key issues that the sector emphasized is that the different travel industry operators and hotels was to encourage our visitors not to completely cancel their trips, but to reschedule so that they can be able to travel when it is appropriate. So this has created some level of assurance because if they had totally canceled, like I would show you some people who did cancel, if they are totally canceled, then it would have meant that most of the travel trade businesses in our country would definitely close, because that means they would be required to refund heavy sources of heavy funds of money which were not available at that moment. So we did a little survey among our members, and we discovered that at least about 3.2% of our members have actually been hit with heavy cancellation, and about 16.7% are pondering closure, but they are not yet there. So what was the immediate actions? The immediate actions was to ensure that the businesses survive. Actually, that is the immediate strategy, or the immediate interventions that were required. Can businesses survive? Now, for business survival, the private sector, working together with government, looks at a number of interventions that can help them to survive. And a number of meetings have taken place between the private sector and government. And we looked at deferment in terms of statutory obligations, which include VAT, which include payee, which include corporation taxes. So we requested government to defer the payment of these statutory obligations so that the businesses remain liquid for the time being, first to survive, then to save some jobs which were on the line, especially if businesses are completely bankrupt or cash-strapped. So we have received some positive on that from the government side, where they have announced a waiver of VAT on upcountry hotels, but we are calling VAT on all hotels. We are saying government should call off VAT for all hotels. The different banks have rescheduled loans, though we are saying yes, they should reschedule the loans, including the interest accruing, so that basically the businesses can start on a good note. So some businesses actually following the UNWTO guidelines, we went into what we call digital marketing, because at the moment, what was very important is for every business to stay alive, is to stay in the face of its customer, communicating the right message that yes, we have this problem with us together, but soon enough will be open for business and you're most welcome. So that was quick. So there was a lot of utilization of the digital platforms. There was a lot of, most individual businesses went for skilling of their members, and definitely some businesses temporarily laid off their workers. And of course, this is painful, but it happened because they could no longer support the salaries. What could be done in the face of this in terms of policies to help the sector come back to its feet? I am happy to say that the government negotiations with the government of the president announced some relaxation on the lockdown, which has come with some positives, that the hotels, the businesses are able to open slightly. So the standard operating procedures are very, very important. And Uganda will be launching its standard hotel and hospitality operating procedures tomorrow, which will guide the operations of restaurants, which will guide operations of hotels. But this is basically to send a message to our consumers, both in the region, in the country, and international travelers, that we actually prepared to have them in a safe environment, of course, with the recommendation of social distancing, having clean services, having clean food. So basically, that is one of the key things in putting in place the standard operating procedures. I am happy also to announce that still negotiations and discussion with the government, working together. Our national parks, especially those of Savannah, will be unveiling their SOPs tomorrow. So in a short time, they will be open for visitation, which helps our businesses in the meantime to also start selling for future clients that will want to be coming. So basically, what I was saying is that for policy, most of the policies that we've been looking at is basically to remain liquid and protect jobs, to build the confidence of the safety of the travelers through the SOPs, both for the hotels, the destinations or the attractions, the parks. There is a heavy engagement on public-private sector collaboration in terms of stimulus packages, loans that are intertwined with the grants so that they can help the sector to survive. as the minister has been saying, this is very, very important, because if we don't do that, then we are going to have a very huge impact, especially on unemployment and almost the sector collapsing. We are pushing for a harmonized, coordinated process of SOPs for the EAC region. And I will take this opportunity to bring to your attention that during the pandemic, the private sector across the region was actually working very closely together. And we, in a few weeks, will be relaunching or reestablishing the East African Tourism Platform in Rwanda. It will be, the secretariat is going to be in Rwanda, and some development partners have seen the importance of this East African Tourism Platform, whose purpose will be to coordinate the private sector effort and in terms of interventions and bring them to the EAC region and different governments for purposes of interventions. So it will be reopening very soon in Rwanda. And one of its role will be to ensure that there is effective coordination of the tourism private sector to harmonize, because statistics indicate that 20% of the travelers that have come into East Africa have actually visited more than two countries in their trip, meaning that harmonized coordination of the private sector, especially the business wing, and the SOPs and the government also alignment, when we market together, when we work together, we will see an increase in terms of arrivals to East Africa. And actually that one even cements the slogan of having an East African destination, when the businesses to business connect and there is increased arrivals. We have also seen increase in innovation in our members in terms of product diversification, because the pandemic created that situation that you cannot survive in one direction. So we have seen some bit of diversification from our members, and now the push in the interim is on the focus is on how do we work with government to increase domestic tourism, but also we need to work as a region to see how we can promote regional tourism, because we see that about 26% of our arrivals in the country come from Kenya, and a very good percentage from the region. So as we discuss this, it is important at the EAC. I'm happy the minister is, I'm happy the secretary in charge of production is online. We need to see how the partner states agree to gradually open the borders. And after how we gradually open our international space. We need to see this very quickly because it is very important for the recovery of the industry. We will also call for committed financing in terms of marketing the destination, especially now when the people will be coming out of a stressful environment. We need to position our countries, we need to position our region as the most safe area for them to visit. And this is built on how we've been able to manage the pandemic in our countries. So we send a safe, communicate that message that actually when our visitors here are very safe. So that is basically what has been going on in terms of what is happening in the country and in terms of policy. So basically what is very important now is working together progressively to see that business resumes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Richard Kawiri. While we appreciate the government for deferring the statutory charges, we also, according to you, appreciate the efforts by the private sector to come together under the East African Tourism Platform to bring and put up as a regional SOPs to guide the sector. Thank you so much. We have taken note and we look forward to the operations of the EATP in Kigali. We're really looking forward to work with them. Maybe let me go back to Ms. Belize and say if she's still around. The EAC region has proven dependent largely on foreign visitors and airlines, less of regional tourists. What is the space for domestic tourism in the EAC region? And what would you recommend as a way forward for adoption of this regional tourism, the domestic tourism, Ms. Belize?
Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you for, I hope you can all hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, I think you're right. We've been, of course, relying on international tourism, and that is also applicable to Rwanda. And the fact is that now it remains uncertain when we're going to start getting international travelers. Whoever is asking for mobile money, maybe you should share with everyone.
Sure, kindly mute your microphone, Lubega. Please mute your microphone, Lubega. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. So the thing is that we don't know what the future holds when it comes to traveling. Everyone is trying to prepare. Everyone is trying to get ready. Everyone is trying to mitigate the impact. And maybe if I go back a little bit on the mitigation of the impact, what we've done as government of Rwanda is that we adopted a recovery fund for the tourism and hospitality industry of $50 million, and we've also implemented a couple of taxes deferrals and even waived some commitment when it came to some public commitments from the private sector. So those two items have really lessened the pressure that these companies in the private sector could have had if the fund was not available. And back into the question that you just asked, I think it's very important that we also think about rebuilding the confidence to travel. And the way I take it is that even with the domestic tourism, one thing we could do is actually take that as a test, because it's one thing again to put guidelines and protocols, but when you actually implement them, it's a whole nother story. So I see the domestic tourism as on one hand a tool that is going to help sustain the industry until international travelers can come into the different EAC countries. But secondly, it could also even be of a test, if I can call it like that, to see, to even get feedback from our own people, to say, okay, guys, this thing actually can't work. I can't travel like this, or this guideline or this protocol in this national park does not make sense for me as a tourist. So it's really going to be an opportunity for us to gather as much insight when it comes to the new way of traveling. When it comes to Rwanda, we've begun to actually to ease the confinement measures, and about 3 weeks ago to a month ago, we started allowing businesses in the hospitality industry to resume operations. And that is hotels and restaurants. And with that, of course, we crafted detailed SOPs that will guide operation of the hotels and restaurants in the new way of working. And so far, the feedback has been really amazing, and of course everyone is learning. This is new to us, this is new to the industry, and we are learning to adjust to the new norms. So it's been very beneficial for us to actually as ease the confinement so that we can get into the business slowly by slowly. And then as of Tuesday, actually, the government of Rwanda has allowed inter-province travels, which is going to kick off the domestic tourism campaign. So, like I said, what we're seeing is that in the short and medium term, the industry will have to rely on domestic tourism to mitigate the consequences of this global pandemic. And through our domestic campaign called Tembera Rwanda, as of actually when in 2017 when we kick off the second wave of Tembera Rwanda, we saw a growth of about 76,000 leisure travelers that became interested in traveling within the country. Now, maybe it's not applicable for for my other brothers from the EABC countries, but we've for many years we've had a challenge to actually entice Rwandans to travel within the country, and of course, there were many reasons to that, which we tackled, I believe, with this campaign. So we are going to resume this campaign, and what aspect of this strategy of domestic campaign post-COVID is the idea to develop partnership with the private sector. So we're encouraging the different value chain in the private sector to actually come together to create experiences that will be able to fulfill the needs of the domestic market by thinking about different packages, and of course thinking about the different target groups. So we talk about families, budget explorers, students, special interest groups like foodies or group tourism operators to pursue and grow the domestic market. But most importantly for government of Rwanda is to create this mindset shift that can encourage the domestic travel. So evidently, this will be done in parallel with the consultation with the Ministry of Health. Like I said earlier, we've put together already guidelines for health and safety for opening up restaurants and hotels. We've completed the ones for national parks, and we are currently finalizing the one for all the other activities, all the other experiences. And maybe to Richard's point, my brother from Uganda, he mentioned something very interesting that I think we should really think about it. We need to think about a regional tourism. We've mentioned it so many times. I think Minister from Tanzania knows that, and even Honorable Waziboma as well knows that. We keep talking about regional tourism, but I feel like there's something missing, and there's something missing that could actually have a push. And on my own opinion, I think the open airspace will be is the glue for kicking off this regional tourism. I personally don't understand how it's going to be, and that's what is going to happen. It's going to travel within the region. I think it will be a shame if we start seeing a lot of outbound going to the different continent because of this particular issue. I believe that this pandemic had made us all aware we should be relying on ourselves, and we should be relying on the people that are closest to us. So I think the regional tourism is something that we really should also tap into. And the other important thing for me is the fact that we're talking about traveling now, but people have changed. The mindset have changed. We don't leave. The the Belize that was, you know, the way I used to travel in January or even in December 2019 has nothing to do with what I expect to have in the next couple of months if I get to travel. So we need to start thinking about how do we communicate about safety and security to our potential consumers, to potential tourists. You know, what is it that they want to hear? What is it that they want to see? You know, we need to always remember that we are talking to human beings that have fears, that have expectations. I think we need to really bank on that and do some sort of deep diving into that aspect, so that we can craft marketing strategies, we can craft SOPs that even will answer to the needs of these tourists.
Thank you, Ms. Belize. Quite elaborate, and it is important to say that. Thank you. Oh, did I cut you short, or?
Yeah. Just
Right.
2 points I want to make. So is to the second the other point I wanted to make is to emphasize on the fact that at the regional level, the EAC level, we need to harmonize protocols and guidelines. Last but not least, maybe that's for the EAC Secretariat. Is it possible for us or for you to create like an EAC COVID-19 committee that could be looking into all these aspects? You know, it's one thing again to have a call, it's good, but I think it would be nice to have a committee that will be following up on the day-to-day basis on these points. That's all I had to add on this. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ms. Belize, and we appreciate that. Maybe something I want to note, and maybe which could bridge the issues of tourism at the regional level, is that we at EABC, we have actually created a desk that is in charge of tourism to take on regional tourism issues and do thorough advocacy. So I take note of the open skies. Really, we also have it as a matter of priority, and we think it's one of the things that are going to really mitigate or promote even domestic or regional tourism, and also try to market our region as a single destination. So EABC being there for over 25 years and being the only regional apex body that is doing this advocacy, I think we are in a better position to actually partner with all the tourism boards and operators to ensure that tourism is well coordinated across the region. This was just something I wanted to bring on board, but maybe let's continue and go back to Honorable Minister Hamisi. What are the lessons learned from COVID, in your opinion, Honorable Minister, that would be benchmarked on to prepare to protect our economies from any other pandemics that could come ahead of time? Honorable Minister, what would be your insight on that?
Mr. Kamanzi, thank you, but your question is not clear. There were a lot of background noises. If you may repeat, please.
Oh, sorry. I'm saying, in your opinion, Honorable Minister, what lessons have you learned from this COVID-19 pandemic that could be benchmarked on to prepare ourselves, prepare our economies from such other pandemics in future? What can we do best? How can we best prepare ourselves, in your opinion, Honorable Minister?
Oh, thank you very much for the question. In my opinion, the COVID-19 pandemic actually reminds us that we are very vulnerable and fragile. We are not that strong as we may think in so many ways. Biologically, we are very fragile, but also economically, socially, because the outbreak of the coronavirus actually disrupted social structures, economies, and businesses, governments. Actually, it took a very significant toll on us in so many ways. So it reminds us that of the fact that how fragile we are as humankind. But secondly, it also teaches us to prepare ourselves for any natural hazards that might come up in any time, to prepare ourselves economically, biologically, technologically, to attend to natural calamities such as this biological outbreak of a contagious virus. Economically, for instance, since I'm in charge of conservation as well, it has taught us how to prepare ourselves in terms of conservation efforts, that we need to have to diversify the sources of financing for conservation, because in most countries, especially in Africa south of the Sahara, we depend on the tourism revenues that comes out of the safaris to finance conservation-based activities. But we do not conserve our natural resources only for the purpose of tourism. We conserve them for so many other various biological, social, and economical goods. For instance, we conserve our forest for water, oxygen, and the other biological needs for the humankind. So since conservation is such an important facet of our lives, we definitely need to find means to safeguard the protected areas, despite anything that might come up, like, for instance, this time, the outbreak of a contagious disease. And again, it teaches us, African countries, especially in the EAC region, or for us, Tanzania, the SADC region, how united we should be. How should we harmonize our economies, our social systems, so that we can thrive together when outbreaks such as these or any other natural catastrophes might come against us. We saw a lot of disruptions in terms of movement of lorries, trucks between the borders, which actually shouldn't have happened if at all we were very strong in terms of harmonizing our policies and strategies. But yet it happened. So it also teaches us that we can't live in isolation. We have to coexist. We have to cooperate. And that's why well-being to their people. So again, also the pandemic also teaches us the importance of being prepared. Most African countries are not prepared biologically or economically, and we have very poor systems of research and development in the countries, especially in terms of financing research and development. Perhaps it would have been an opportunity for African countries to come up with a treatment or a strategy that could have saved the world, because we've abundant medicinal plants in our various protected areas that could have helped if only we had we were robust in terms of conducting research and networking with other international research organizations. Perhaps it was a chance for African countries to come up with something that could have saved the world. But the fact that we are not very much keen into investing in research and development, in technology, it has really challenged us. And we missed the opportunity. And lastly, perhaps in my opinion, I think we have to be ready to adopt to changes. For instance, right now, African countries have to come up with strategies on how to adapt living with the pandemic, living with corona. As it is said by scientists world over, especially those at the WHO, that perhaps the coronavirus is not going to go away. It's going to transform from being an epidemic to being an endemic virus. So we're going to live with the virus. So what measures are we having in place to adapt to living with the new disease? So adaptation is also one of the major issues that African countries, East African countries for that matter, should learn to embrace. And also the way the various countries have been reacting, the way the various sectors have been responding. We've been seeing a lot of uncoordinated efforts between the countries, each one trying to hit the bush because the virus was new. It also teaches us that we need calmness when pandemics or natural catastrophes like these happens. Perhaps some of us overreacted, and some were seeing, those who didn't overreact were seeing as being laid backwards. But no one was sure exactly as to what is going to happen at the face of an outbreak of a contagious illness such as this. So most of these East African countries, some actually were copying strategies that were being implemented in other developed countries, and some of them actually caused a lot of havoc amongst the people. And if only we had adopted our own solution, our own East African solution, local solution, perhaps we could have done better. So it also teaches us that we need to have that calmness and readiness to respond to natural disasters such as this. Perhaps those are my 2 cents on the questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Amisi, and we appreciate that. And key points I've picked out of this that we are vulnerable together, and if one is affected, the other one is definitely affected in every way. And that is why the moment my CEO is at the border right now to ensure that cargo has to move from Tanzania and flow goes back to Kenya and vice versa. So EABC has been at the forefront to ensure that we have this coordinated approach. But also I note that it is important to go back to the drawing board and see how can we protect our homegrown solutions? How can we ensure that research and development is at the forefront? So I think that is very key. Homegrown solutions are very important, and we think that can help. Let's go to Mr. Mohamed DRC. Maybe I'm coming back to you, sir. In your opinion as well, what have been the urgent initiatives that will help protect our jobs? We know that this COVID has made people lose jobs. To you, what initiatives would be there to protect jobs, sustain the self-employed, and support companies' liquidity and operations to accelerate recovery of the sector in going forward in future? Mr. Mohamed, yes. Mr. Mohamed, are you there? All right. If Mr. Mohamed is not there, I think let's go to the chat. I've seen many questions flowing, and the question by Mr. Raymond Bandio. He asked, his question goes to Honorable Bazivamo, and he says, since we have the national stakeholders, including the ministers and government and governing board, can EAC come up with a joint guidelines on the mitigation and responding plans to mitigation and reopening plans? Are there guidelines on the reopening? Honorable Christophe, are you still there?
Geoffrey, I have not got too well. Can you repeat the question?
Yes. Mr. Raymond Bandio says, since we have the national... Can you, Honorable Basivama, can you hear me now?
Can you repeat?
Yes, the question says, since we have the national stakeholders, including the ministers and governing boards, can EAC come up with a joint guidelines on the mitigation and reopening plans? Mitigation and reopening plans, guidelines at the EAC level. Are they there? Or are there discussions around that space?
Thank you, Dufre, and thanks for the question. I had said at the beginning that we are preparing a Sector Council of Ministers, which is planned to take place on the 16th June, this meaning this month. And one of the outcome from this regional Sector Council on Tourism is to come up with a specific tourism recovery plan. We have already a draft of which has to be discussed at partner state level and then later on agreed upon at regional level. But it is a specific one. Otherwise, for the East African Community COVID-19 economic recovery plan, which includes also tourism, this one is already has been concluded. And in this Sector Council of Ministers of Tourism we are planning, we want also to conclude with the marketing strategy, East African Community marketing strategy, where COVID-19 impact will be covered. And we from it is where we have recommendations on how forward here. In specifically, this is what we want to say. Otherwise, all of the different things were discussed under, first of all, for East African Community COVID-19 response plan, and then in East African Community recovery plan, especially economic recovery plan. So these elements which are highlighted as guidelines, we have actually the East African Community administrative guidelines, which we have issued to ease actually what is being done under health, under trade, including transport, which guidelines capture actually all the sectors, but which are to be reviewed on a regular basis. It means after the meeting of 18th, if strong recommendations towards how we open and how we move forward afterwards, then this will be again recaptured in the administrative guidelines while you are updating them. So let's say that this is what I wanted to say on the question, but I want to once again to insist on the fact that regional tourism is key for East Africa. And when you speak also about the African Continental Free Trade Area, it's important actually to see how to promote and give more room for tourism in that process. And I think this is something we have also to agree upon, especially as East African Community has been requested to take the lead in that process of implementing the African Continental Free Trade Area, which we have begun. And especially, I wish again to thank you and the other stakeholders in East Africa, because once again this year, let's say last year, 2019, our economic community, REC East Africa, has again emerged the first one as the most integrating one. We should be emphasizing this in the tourism sector to ensure actually we move more towards East African community being seen as an East African community tourism destination, as a single tourism destination, where of course we don't forget the specificity of each country, each partner state, but where we implement really this commonness, this working together, this coming together in solidarity as one region. This is very important, and we have seen through this COVID-19 that it is important really to think about local development, local industries, to promote local production, especially when it comes to what we are able to do ourselves, not to keep on focusing on what is coming from outside, but to put more emphasis on actually local promotion, local industries, and things like that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Christophe Bazivamo. Another question goes to Honorable Minister Hamisi and comes from Kilimanjaro.com. I think it's a website in Tanzania. And he is asking, the Honorable Minister mentioned that he was looking into reducing park fees in order to become competitive on the world stage. Could he address more on that, or what initiatives are there? Have there been discussions in terms of trying to reduce park fees? I think this is specifically for Tanzania, or maybe across the, maybe you can give it a regional approach as you respond to this question, Honorable Minister.
Yeah, thank you, Geoffrey. Actually, I announced this when we were launching the standard operating procedures 2 weeks ago. Our idea is we work with the private sector and with our conservation institutions on the park fees and other related expenses that actually hikes the cost to which a tourist should spend. This comes amid the fact that visitors or tourists, for that matter, have been also hit economically, much as they want to come and breathe out and somehow come back to the normal life, experiencing the new life after COVID-19 or during COVID-19. So under this very fact, we thought we would undertake to change some fees, some rates, different sections within the tourism value chain, from the aviation fees for airlines, from the landing fees for airlines, from taxes, from non-tax charges, all the way like park fees, concession fees, so that the cost to which a tourist pays by visiting Tanzania and going to the parks shall be somehow reduced to something reasonable, so that we can compete. Because we understand that tourism might, in the end, come back to normalcy, but it's going to grow slowly as time goes by. And then we also understand that there is competition. Tanzania receives tourists at most, actually by more than 80%. That comes for safaris in the various natural attractions that we have. And these natural attractions that we have are shared by our neighbors, and also we are also competing with other countries in different parts of Africa, south of the Sahara. And for that matter, we think to reposition ourselves so that we can win the competition, we have to also reduce our costs. So we're working on the numbers to see how we can do this better, so that we can catalyze the growth of the tourism sector in the months to come.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. Oh, sorry.
No, thank you, Geoffrey. I'm done. I'm finished with that.
Great. Such great initiatives there. I think it is loud and clear. Tourism in Tanzania is one of the booming ones, and we thank you for such initiatives in trying to ensure that it is an attractive investment and way to make money, and we look forward to many tourists coming to Tanzania. Let me bring in our, I can see our ED. I think he should be back. Dr. Mathuki, are you available? Yeah, I think he spent most of his time at the border trying to ensure that cargo moves. But is ED, are you around? All right, if ED is not around, I recognize that Dr. Kirsten Foken, the cluster coordinator of GIZ, was in the meeting. Dr. Kirsten, are you still around? That JZ is one of the biggest stakeholders in our region, trying to promote tourism, and I know that tourism is at the forefront of your work. Dr. Kirsten, yes. what would you advise as the way to go? How do the EAC partner states come together in terms of trying to recover? What would be your insights, advisory insights as one of the key development partners in the region? Dr. Kirsten.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you very much. And thank you for organizing this event. I listened to all the contributions, and I can only say most of the points, all the points are very valid, very important. I really compliment the EAC Secretariat. I know that you have been working hard in the past weeks on the tourism recovery plan, and I think most of the elements are really important, and we are really happy to start working on this together. I totally agree with the domestic or regional tourism. Domestic tourism, probably some of the countries are relatively small. So with the regional approach, a part of the East African approach everybody supports is simply also from a business perspective, makes sense to enlarge the markets. The connectivity, the airspace definitely is a key issue, and some of the aspects of harmonization for people to be able to also work in the different countries, like tour guides. And these are some issues the EAC Secretariat is working on in the context of the liberalization of trade and services. I think it's everything, most of the areas EAC Secretariat is working on in the tourism sector and the service sector are important, and this is now the time to accelerate implementation, I think, to really make sure that the region benefits from the integration. Further to, of course, every country has its national approach and plans, but I think it's the time to really implement the issues, the plans, the strategies that exist. The marketing strategy DSG Basivarma has mentioned is important, of course, to also show to the European markets that East Africa is there and it's here and it's ready, almost ready to visit. I think the marketing awareness building sensitization is important as well. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kirsten. It is important. It's about time that those strategies, policies, regulations, whatever that is there to facilitate tourism comes into being implemented, and that's quite important. And thank you so much, Dr. that.
Geoffrey, you're on mute.
I think the question goes to Honorable Minister Hamisi, and they're saying that the visa fees, other partner states have removed visa fees, and what is, I think this was someone putting you on spot, Honorable Minister, what is the United Republic of Tanzania doing to remove visa fees to be able to facilitate the tourist flow easily? I'm sorry, this is just not me, it is just someone from the chat. Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Geoffrey. Actually, my docket is not related to issues of visas and such kind. They are under another docket for Home Affairs, Internal Affairs. So I might not have a clear response to that specifically, but it's under the task force that is working on a comprehensive tourism development plan as one of the proposals that should be deliberated by the government in the cabinet sometimes in the future after the document is completed. But at this point in time, I can't have a position on that because it's being worked on by the task force.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I think, Charity, you've heard from the able minister. Discussions are ongoing, and we can only trust and wait for when it is able to be discussed, to be announced to the public.
Geoffrey, again, you're on mute.
Oh, Mr. Mohammed, sorry. Mr. Mohammed, are you back?
Yes, I'm back, Geoffrey.
So there's a question to you, sir. What have been the urgent initiatives that will help to protect jobs, sustain the self-employed, and support companies' liquidity and operations to accelerate recovery of the sector in the future? Maybe in a few minutes, because we'll be closing the next 7 minutes. If you can just talk to this in just 2 to 3 minutes, and we'll give each panelist one round of thanks. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Geoffrey. Is okay, Geoffrey?
It is okay, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Geoffrey, and my apologies to my fellow panelists and everyone. I was juggling between another meeting, so I had made it clear earlier on to Peter, but no worries. The first thing I want to say, when it comes to Kenya and the actions that we've taken, a couple of days ago, again, we were given $20 million to cushion the tourism industry, specifically hotels and also the affiliated businesses, and specifically on payroll. To help these companies to be able to pay salaries and keep some of these employees who've been laid off. And one of the strategies that we're using is to try and see as much as possible to help the lower cards who are laid off quickly. And obviously, they don't have a lot of savings, and these are people who suffer the most and they're the most vulnerable. But we are sitting down to draw all the mechanism in place. So we have $20 million, and the government has also promised to give us more in case we are able to show prove that we have utilized those funds properly. On recovery, I'm sure you must have discussed about open skies, and that is very key on our agenda as well, and also for the region. But more importantly, and I think I'll urge every one of us here on this forum, is that we need to also do incentives for these airlines to start choosing our countries, whether it is Nairobi, whether it is Kilimanjaro, whether it's Kigali, Entebbe, everywhere. That's very, very important we do that. And then just got tail end about visa fees. As much as visa fees may not be a big, what can I say, incentive for people to come here, but we need to remember that if we make it very easy for them, and this is where the issue of electronic visa comes in. And apart from electronic visa, I think we need to start embracing electronic visas where, if possible, instead of waiting to line up at a kiosk for the immigration, you can just go in straight away unless you come from one of those countries that have been marked for further check. And I think working together, that will be key. And that's one of the things that we are doing, as Kenya. So some of the incentives that we are really looking into is park fees. We are also going to look into the landing fees for these airlines. And remember, the coastal circuit, which is the beach area, which is Mombasa, Malindi, Watamu, is purely different on how they operate because they are mainly dependent on butterflies, and this is also affects Zanzibar. Or what Zanzibar gets and Mombasa, these are the beach goers, and people want to go on a beach holiday. And the business is totally different because we are targeting the charter incentives. So I think these are some of the areas that we can collaborate. I recall when Qatar Airlines and the likes of Turkish were coming to this region, we were actually sharing with Zanzibar and Mombasa until such a point that there was enough load to cater for both, and they started doing direct flights. So I think we need to collaborate until such a time that there is enough load to allow these airlines to start coming in. So yes, we are ready, and I'll urge all our neighbors and the region that we start opening up. And of course, within reason to make sure that we also have the safety measures in place, because the last thing we want is anybody coming here and leaving, that they've been infected. But on the other side, we also need to be very optimistic. For some reason, divine intervention probably, and also the measure that different governments have taken, Africa has not been badly affected the way Europe or Asia has been affected. The virus came last to Africa. My prayer and the push we need to make sure is that when the rest of the world has reopened, we are not left holding the bigger problem or the wrong end of the stick of the virus. When the world has kicked out COVID, we also need to kick it out at the same time. And we should not be saying, you know what, it came here last. That's not what should happen, because tourism really revolves a lot about health and safety. Thank you very much, Geoffrey.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mohammed. Just speaking from where you ended from in terms of trying to facilitate airspace and moving load from the region to the rest of the world, we have Madam Anataria Arimba from Trademark. I think I saw her on the participants, and I know that Trademark is doing a bit of some work in that space. Anataria, maybe just a question. What initiatives could be there in your docket in terms of trying to help the region recover, especially try to ensure that the skies are open and maybe the load or the fresh produce is picked from the region to the rest of the alternative markets? Anataria, maybe just a few minutes and give us some insights on that.
Thanks, Geoffrey, for giving me an opportunity to speak on this. As you've mentioned, Trademark is supporting through the Safe Trade Facility different interventions to ensure that we have trade moving across the region. So one specific area that we are looking to work, or that we are working with EABC and the Secretariat on, is on facilitating open skies. So doing the necessary research to ensure and identify what needs to be done from a regulatory point of view, and also what other incentives need to be offered to ensure that the costs of air freight is much lower, especially as we look to focus on domestic and regional tourism. In addition to that, we are also working with the different countries through the support of tourism boards and tourism associations and the East African Tourism Platform to come up with a consolidated approach in which we engage in the tourism sector to facilitate and strengthen regional tourism, but also looking at the different recovery plans that have been developed, the standard operating procedures, and seeing how that can be harmonized to make it easier for people to move from one country to another. Looking at the protocols that are there that have been developed on trade and transport specifically, we see this as a lesson on what can be done better in the tourism sector. So collaboration will be key to ensure that what has been agreed upon at country level is effective enough to boost and facilitate regional tourism.
Thank you so much, Anataria. Thank you so much, everyone. I think my able panelists for this, for making time. Just to peruse through the key takeaways out of this discussion is that there's need to prioritize internal tourism, domestic tourism, drafting of common internal tourism framework, comprehensive trainings for frontline staff at the airports. There is need for EAC to jointly prepare reopening plans, the way they are doing for mitigation plans. There's need for one airspace to contribute to EAC as a single tourist destination. There's need full opening from lockdown needs to standard operating procedures in hotels, restaurants to maintain safety of clients. And to expedite the establishment of the Secretariat of East African Tourism Platform to harmonize and coordinate tourism, the sector space, but under, of course, the flagship of under the supervision of East African Business Council, because it's the only major regional apex body, and also need to have coordinated operations at a regional level. We are going to share the report from this webinar, and I wish to thank Honorable Minister Hamisi Kigwangala for having made time. Honorable Christopher Mazivamo, we thank you so much. Don't take your time for granted. We thank Ms. Belize Kaliza from the Rwanda Tourism Board, the Chief Tourism Officer. Mr. Richard Kawere, thank you so much for insights, quite elaborate, and Mr. Mohammed Hirsi for your invaluable inputs. Thank you so much, people. Thank you to the team at EABC for helping me to coordinate this webinar. On behalf of the EABC CEO Dr. Peter Mazuki, allow me to really thank you so much, so very much for making time. He would have wanted to be here, but he's at the same time at the front line himself as well to ensure that regional trade is moving, movement of cargo, people, and services will move as we recover from the pandemic. Thank you so much. My name is Geoffrey Kamanzi once again, and I wish you a very, very nice day. Please keep safe, and God bless you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the day.
All right. Bye-bye, people. All right. Bye.
Thank you.